Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. A massive welcome to all the grade 7 learners joining us today. We are going to be tackling something absolutely crucial about how we study the ancient world. Have you ever stopped to wonder, like when you're looking at an ancient map or reading a history book, how do historians actually know what happened thousands of years ago? I mean, it's not like the ancient Romans had smartphones to live stream their battles, right? So how do we figure out who did what and why it even mattered? Well, today we're going to unpack the ultimate tools of the history detective. We're talking about corroboration and historical perspective. We'll look at how we question different sources and, most importantly, how we back up our claims with rock-solid evidence. Okay, let's dive into this, because this question hits on a super common misconception. Imagine you're out digging in the desert, right? You brush away the sand and boom, you find a perfectly preserved ancient diary. It's a primary source from someone who was literally right there. It describes this huge, chaotic event in amazing detail. It is so tempting to just hold up that diary and say, "Case closed, we know the absolute truth." But hold on a second. If you only ever listen to one person's side of a story, are you really getting the whole picture? Think about it. What if the person writing that diary was just having a terrible day? Or what if they were standing on the complete opposite side of the city from where the actual action took place? History detectives know that a single primary source, as awesome as it is, just doesn't give us the complete, unquestionable truth all by itself.
To actually get to the truth, historians rely on a totally essential skill, and that skill is called corroboration. Basically, corroboration is the process of checking if multiple, independent sources agree with each other so we can verify historical claims. Let me give you a more everyday example that might hit a little closer to home. Let's say there's a massive mashed potato food fight in the middle school cafeteria. Just total chaos. Naturally, the principal wants to know exactly who started it. If they only interview the kid who threw the very first potato, they're probably going to hear a story about how it was self-defense or my hand slipped, right? To find the actual truth, the principal needs corroboration. They need to talk to the lunch monitor standing in the corner, the kids sitting 3 tables away, and maybe even check the hallway cameras. They need multiple independent witnesses. If all those different sources point to the exact same detail, like who threw the first potato, then the principal can confidently back up their claim. And historians? They do the exact same thing, just, with ancient stone tablets instead of cafeteria monitors.
So how do we actually pull this off? Well, when we're trying to prove a claim about the ancient past, we follow a pretty specific process. Step 1. We find independent sources. This means finding accounts from people who definitely didn't just copy off each other's homework. We want completely different viewpoints. Step 2. We check for matching agreements. Say a Roman soldier's letter, a Greek merchant's logbook, and an Egyptian stone carving all mention this massive, crazy storm in the Mediterranean Sea during the exact same year. Boom, we've successfully corroborated that fact. We can be super confident that storm actually happened. But it's step 3 that really makes being a historian fun, investigating the differences. Because, let's be real, almost always when you have multiple independent sources, they are not going to match up perfectly.
And that brings us to this massive realization in historical thinking. When historical sources disagree, it doesn't automatically mean one of them is lying. I know it's super easy to look at 2 ancient documents that tell completely different stories about the exact same event and think, well, somebody's making stuff up. But as history detectives, we've got to look deeper. These discrepancies, these disagreements, they aren't frustrating dead ends. They are actually incredibly valuable clues. They crack open a whole new level of investigation into the actual people who created those sources.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing exactly why these sources disagree. And usually it boils down to one big concept: historical perspective. Whenever you look at a primary or secondary source, you've got to interrogate the creator. First up, consider their personal background and culture. A wealthy king and a struggling farmer are going to experience and record a drought completely differently, right? Second, who is their intended audience? Are they scribbling a private diary just for themselves, or are they carving a giant stone monument for the entire city to stare at? You're obviously going to communicate differently depending on who is listening. And finally, what is their ultimate goal? Are they just trying to record the exact facts, or are they trying to make their ruler look like some unstoppable superhero? A creator's perspective acts like a filter, entirely shaping how they record an event. And that is exactly why independent sources differ so often.
All right, let's look at a case study. Conflicting accounts of an ancient event.
Let's move away from the theory and look at a concrete, worked example. We're going to apply our new history detective tools to a specific scenario where 2 rival ancient empires write about the exact same battle. And this brilliantly illustrates how corroboration and perspective play out in the real world. Okay, so one primary source is this massive, grand public monument carved by Empire A. It proudly brags, "We crushed our enemies completely at the river." But then, we find a private diary entry from Empire B that reads, "We fought them to a glorious standstill at the river." Now, they are talking about the exact same event, on the exact same day, but these descriptions are worlds apart. If you only read Empire A's monument, you'd think it was a total blowout. But if you only read Empire B's diary, you'd think it was a perfectly even tie. Their intended audiences and their purposes, like Empire A trying to project power to its citizens, while Empire B is maybe trying to save face after a really tough fight, completely rewrite the narrative. So, how do we untangle this as historians? First, we look for the corroborated facts. What do both of these independent sources actually agree on? Well, they both mention a river, and they both mention fighting. Because of that, we can confidently support the claim that a battle did, in fact, occur at that river. That's our factual foundation. Then we look at the differing perspectives. Who won? Well, that's where the sources totally split. Empire A claims a massive victory, and Empire B claims a tie. We can't automatically say which one is telling the objective truth about the winner. But by spotting this difference, we've actually uncovered something way more interesting about the propaganda, the pride, and the political agendas of both those empires.
So, the crucial point is this. Corroboration builds the foundation of facts, but investigating perspectives builds the complete story. You literally need both to truly answer how historians know what really happened. You use corroboration to lock down the basics, the who, what, where, and when, and then you analyze those differing perspectives to figure out the why and the how. Because studying the past isn't just about memorizing a bunch of random dates. It's about evaluating evidence, figuring out human nature, and realizing that history is this giant, complex web of different viewpoints. Mastering this kind of source analysis, that's a real game changer. That is what turns you from someone who just reads history into a true history detective.
Now, before we wrap up this explainer, I want to pass the magnifying glass over to you. It is time to apply what you've learned to a brand new historical mystery. Imagine you uncover a single primary source. It's an ancient merchant's letter, and in it, this merchant is complaining bitterly that the local king is a cruel, totally unfair tyrant. Based on everything we just talked about regarding independent sources, audiences, and purposes, what specific type of additional source would you try to track down to corroborate that claim? Would you look for a grand monument built by the king himself? Maybe another merchant's diary? Or what about the tax records from the local farmers? Think about what perspective would give you the most independent view to really test that merchant's claim. Keep asking those big historical questions. Keep demanding solid evidence, and I'll see you in the next explainer.